Good afternoon, and welcome to the Carolina Codecast. Today is a very special episode. It's a compilation episode with John Warner. John was originally supposed to be our second episode back in September, whenever we first started the podcast, as the Innoventure Futures Festival that he ran was about to start. Unfortunately, there was a power failure in the middle of the recording. And as I was just getting started with these tools and learning how to put the podcast together to publish it, I was not able to get it edited and published in time ahead of the initial Futures Festival. So we had John back on the show in November to give us a recap of how everything went and what the future of the Innoventure Futures Festival looked like. And so today you're going to hear that compilation episode today. John is a guy who's been an advocate for the economic development of the upstate for many, many years, and it's a worthwhile listen. I hope you enjoy. Good afternoon again, and welcome back to the Carolina Codecast again with John Warner. As mentioned earlier, this is the recap of the Innoventure Futures Festival that happened back in September of this year. We were not able to get the original interview out ahead of the event, and so we decided to have John back on so he could have a recap and talk about what happened with the event this year and what's going on in the future. Welcome back to the show, John.
Good to be here.
Thanks for coming back. So how did everything go this year? How was Innoventure this year?
You know, we were pretty pleased. We had 4 different planning meetings leading up to the September event. We got to June. We weren't really sure we were going to be able to do it because we didn't have enough sponsors. Started talking about, well, maybe this wasn't realistic. And then all of a sudden, a whole bunch of folks came on board. And so we were able to pull it off. And what that meant was we had to do it in about 60 days. So we ended up having about 150 people participate, industry, academia, entrepreneurs, economic development. So I think the people that came were impressed. They get a little bit of taste of some technology, some art, some music. We had a couple of art from musicians, performing jazz during our breaks. We had several artists with exhibits, which was kind of cool. We had some inspirational things like, the Dance of Bioengineering by Delphine Dean. She's a PhD from MIT. She chairs the bioengineering at Clemson. She's also a ballet dancer.
Oh,
and
wow.
John Sterling, who talked about the jazz of sales. I mean, he's one of the best serial entrepreneurs in town, but he's also a sax player, and he busked downtown on Friday nights. And so it was fun, and I think people kind of got what we were talking about. And now where do we go from here? That
is a really interesting way to pull everything together there. So where do you go from here? Are there plans for next year already?
Well, that's a really good idea. We've kind of followed up with the major organizations that participated. And of course, if we're going to do something in 2024, we're going to have some money, right? Somebody's got to say, hey, this is a good idea. And so we've really started focusing on this as kind of a business development opportunity for the sponsors. We looked into South by Southwest, which was kind of our inspiration. And The question was, where did they come from? And what we found out was the first year, it was all about connecting the kind of eclectic music scene in Austin to the music producers. I mean, it was a business development opportunity. Now, it was all about music because that live music in Austin was a big thing. But, really at its core, it was about business, the business of music. And so, we've kind of taken inspiration of that and said, we need to be the same thing. And so, what are we best in class here? It's in advanced manufacturing and logistics and things like that. And so we've kind of boiled that down and says, what we do? We make and move things here. Whether it's BMW making cars or GE making power turbines, or Robert Bosch making hydraulic pumps. We make and move things. Even talk about Delphine in her medical devices, right? I mean, at the end of the day, it's about making them, monitoring you and I moving around. So it's a common thing that we think can rally, the region.
That's actually really catchy. Make and move. I like that. I'm going to use that if you don't mind.
No, that's fine. We want you. We want you to use it. We want everybody to use it. And what's kind of cool about it is it's simple enough to remember, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, the next person you talk to, you can say, what we do here is make and move things, and you can remember it. Now, you know what? Here's the other thing cool about it. If we talk to somebody in Munich or in Clermont-Ferrand or Taipei, Taiwan, guess what? You know, they'd hear that we make and move things, and they'd say, yeah, that's what those guys do. So, you know, it's credible globally. You know, that's what we do. Now, think about making and moving things and all the, you know, the information technology and the data around that.
Yeah.
Think about, you know, all the advances in AI and how that can impact a plant floor, how that can impact a supply chain. You know, so we just need to be the world leader in that. And I think we have the ability to do that. And I know you kind of run your code school, and you know
not code school. We're not affiliated with the code school. The conference. It's an unfortunate name overlap where the Carolina Code Conference and the Carolina Code School.
Carolina Code Conference. Okay.
Often confused, but no, we're not related at all.
The Code Conference. Okay. So that's what I meant to say. And so, you know, the question is, where do the folks that participate in your Code Conference overlap with advanced manufacturing and supply chains and things like that? And
absolutely.
You know, now take, you know, each of the organizations that's active in our region and try to find, you know, put the Venn diagram together, you know, what's the center of that?
Yeah.
And so that's actually what we're really trying to do right now.
Yeah. I mean, when you mention it like that, I don't know if they're still around, but I remember there was a logistics company around here called M33 that I remember got on my radar years ago. And one of the reasons they got on my radar as a programmer was because they were using a language called Groovy. That is not really a mainstream programming language, but it runs on the Java virtual machine, and it's which is of course a huge ecosystem of languages. And I was really interested in that language at the time, and I found the company because they were using an interesting language. But
one of the M33 founders that I knew was a great guy, Sammy Riddle.
Okay,
and you know M33 has now been sold, right? But Sammy's still around and his partners are still around. And I think that's one of the real opportunities for us here is when we can find those serial entrepreneurs.
Nice.
People that have been successful one time and, you know, he did all right. So he's got some resources to be an angel investor and maybe, you know, reach back out to him and invest in the next generation of companies that make and move things. Because that's definitely what they did, right? They trek less than truckload routes all over the country.
Absolutely.
And so he knows he's an expert. He knows something, got a lot of relationships, and that's the kind of smart money you'd like investing in the next generation of these companies. And so that's the kind of depth that I think we have here and the opportunity for us going forward.
Nice. I might have to get you to introduce me to him. He'd probably be a fun interview on here as well.
Well, you know, that's one of the advantages of having done this a long time.
Yep.
You know, and just, you know, a lot of people over time.
Got that Rolodex.
Well, it's not just a Rolodex. It's just you live through a lot of it. I went on a walk with Jack Sterling. Excuse me. I went on a walk with John Sterling this past weekend, and John is Jack's son, and we were talking about his father. You know, and I remember back in the early 80s when he had a venture fund. It was called Reedy River Ventures, and it was a small business investment corporation. And you know, he ultimately left to be the president of the Palmetto Seed Capital Fund, and they made an investment in Corporate Telemanagement Group, which was one of the most successful venture-backed companies in South Carolina history. And John said, there just aren't too many people that would remember all that history. I said, well, I've just lived a long time, man.
It sounds like you need to be starting a podcast.
Yeah.
So when's do you have any dates lined up for next year for the Futures Festival?
Well, the Future Festival itself, we would like to be a multi-day, multi-venue event, and we're thinking about kind of the middle of October, maybe the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday after Fall for Greenville. So people could, come for the weekend, do Fall for Greenville, and then, spend a day or two with us at our Futures Festival.
That's a great idea.
We're also thinking about maybe doing something in the spring and in April, and that's a very new idea, so I don't have a lot of details about that, but it's, we need to start to create a sense of urgency, right? I mean, we need to rally the troops and, hey, we're going to have another event in April, and so we need to get everybody together. And, imagine if it was the September event where we had 150 people, and it was bigger and it was more comprehensive, we've got the university centers more engaged, ICAR and the AI Institute at Clemson, and the Center for Advanced Manufacturing, the AI Institute at the University of South Carolina. We got people more engaged. Then we have the companies involved. So the thing that really worked well in September was them saying, here's what our innovation needs are. Here's what our problems are. Now think about being a technology provider and, hearing a bunch of companies saying, here's my problems. That's a low-hanging fruit for you, isn't it? A target-rich environment. And so then
absolutely.
make sure the economic developers are involved, because we want to. So a great example of, I think, an opportunity is ZF. They just made an announcement for a $500 million investment in Grayport, expand their factory into e-mobility kind of solutions. Well, you know what? They also need an innovation center here. I mean, we have ICAR, and they need to be right next door, building relationships with the faculty and the students. And so, leverage this, world-class manufacturing facility they have to begin to move up the chain with them, and have an innovation center here. So we want to make sure we connect the technology companies with the manufacturers and logistics organizations. That's business development. For the students, maybe it's a career opportunity. We want ICAR students going to work for ZF. We just want them going to work for ZF here instead of having to go to Germany.
Yeah.
And and then for the economic developers, it's opportunity to locate innovation centers, headquarters here, create jobs, for skilled workers, but also for university graduates. Make sure we retain those ICAR students when they graduate. They don't have to leave the state to find a job. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's definitely a noble goal. I mean, one of the side effects, at least in my industry, the technology and software side of things, is that almost everybody in my industry has a lot of remote opportunities available to them. And so it's very easy for people in this field to live and work around Greenville while working remotely for a lot of companies all over the place. And we've kind of seen a real uptick in that since COVID, since so many companies went much more heavily remote after that. But
both my children work remotely, so I get that, and I'm glad they do, because they get to live in Greenville and work for companies or headquarters somewhere else. But really around here, I think at the end of the day, what we do is make and move things that are physical, right? We make cars, we make power turbines, we make hydraulic pumps, and those are physical. And
you got to be there for those.
Yeah, while I don't underestimate how important working remotely is, I think our real sweet spot, there's a term, mechatronics, which is a bit of a buzzword, but it's kind of the intersection of mechanical engineering, chemical engineering, biomedical engineering with computer science and information technology. And that's our real strength, I think, is, where you start to combine digital and the physical. Again, you think about the manufacturing base, logistics base we have. The IT people can probably still work remotely in that scenario, but somebody's got to work, on the assembly line.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. That's not a remote job.
And you don't do economic development by going, hey, we've got, a great place for you to work remote. You do economic development by making sure there are jobs for people who are actually here.
Well, I mean, I think the city of Greenville's benefited from a lot of people working remotely, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely.
So per capita income and educational attainment in the city of Greenville now matches Austin, Texas, and Raleigh, North Carolina. How about that? That's pretty amazing.
That is pretty amazing. I believe that too.
My children live here, and they both work remotely. Now, I mean, they get on a plane and fly places a lot too. That's part of the reason they can live in Greenville, because once a lot of your work is on a plane, what difference does it make anymore? I think that has helped Greenville boom, that whole remote aspect. But when it comes to making things, it's a little bit harder to do that remotely.
Yep.
You kind of got to be there because there's something physical involved in it.
Absolutely.
And, when you really start to think about where are we distinctive, I mean, where would somebody in Munich or Clermont-Ferrand or Taipei look at us and say, hey, they're best in class? I really think it comes down to making a move in things.
I think that's probably very accurate for this region as well. And, with the logistics program and the manufacturing and supply chain options that are out there educationally around here from Clemson, not just from Clemson, but from the surrounding areas as well. I mean, we've got, as you were talking earlier before we actually started the recording, we've got within 3 hours of us a lot of research institutions.
Yeah, we got 6 research universities within 3 hours of Greenville. I don't think most people realize that.
Yeah.
So you got the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. You got UNC Charlotte. And if you hadn't been there, that's an impressive campus. You got University of South Carolina. You got Clemson University. You got University of Georgia, and you got Georgia Tech.
Yep.
And all of those are within 3 hours. And so, kind of pulling that together, and then you take the world-class manufacturers that we have, Michelin and BMW and Bosch and ZF and folks like that. And we really do have the ability to be distinctive in the world in this area. And that's what excites me. And, just kind of turning the light on for people, it takes a while. Cultural change is hard, but I think we're starting to get there. I'm starting to hear more and more people say, hey, we really need to re-envision economic development if we're going to get ourselves to the next level.
Absolutely. All right. So, last things, wrapping up. What was your favorite memory of Interventure this year, the Interventure Futures Festival this year?
I think it was the diversity of the people that were there, all the way from young people, students, to folks with gray hair like me, men and women, people in academia, industry, economic development. And I think the folks that self-selected in, we had music and we had art and we had inspirational presentations. So it was a real creative group of people, innovators, entrepreneurs. And so while on the one hand, it seems like there was a lot of diversity there, what we all had in common is we put together that agenda and everybody self-selected and showing up. And I think we found out we had a lot more in common than we thought. And that was really rewarding and kind of inspiring to keep going and see if we can't get this to another level. Absolutely.
All right. And last question I got to ask, because it's game week. This podcast isn't going to run before the game happens, but predictions for the game, the Palmetto Bowl, the Clemson, South Carolina game. What are you thinking for the score?
I don't know what the score is, but I'm pretty optimistic about my Tigers over the last few weeks. Dabo's got their attention, and I think we owe a lot of credit to Tyler.
We do. Thank you, Tyler and Spartanburg.
You got them motivated, and they've really got their act together the last 3 or 4 weeks, and I think we're going to prevail down in Columbia. So it's going to be a good game. I don't think either team has kind of performed up to their expectations at the beginning of the year. So both of them have a lot to prove, and it's maybe more important in some other years. So go Tigers.
Go Tigers. All right. We'll hope we'll pull them out. If we don't, I've been talking a lot of trash, and I'm going to be hearing about it. But
you're going to hear about it if we lose one way or the other. So
that's true.
We might as well win. And then
exactly.
We can just be smug.
Well. All right. Thanks for coming back, John. Right. This has been the Carolina Codecast.
Yeah.
Well, that concludes the interview from November. And now, if you'll stick with us, you can listen to the interview from September as we were leading up to the Interventure Futures Festival. Hope you enjoy it. Welcome to the Carolina Codecast. I'm here today with John Warner, talking about the Interventure Futures Festival.
Hey, how are you doing?
Welcome to the show. What are you doing these days?
Well, the biggest thing I'm working on right now is the Interventure Futures Festival. So it's coming up September the 22nd. It'll be the afternoon. That's a Friday.
Okay.
And what we're trying to do is take the first step in developing our regional innovation ecosystem. So we've got some big organizations coming, and they're going to talk about what their needs are. And then we've got some technology providers, service providers who maybe can help meet those needs. And a big part of the festival is kind of connecting people together. But we did some planning back in the spring, and a whole bunch of folks said, "Don't make this a conference." I go to a lot of conferences, make it fun. So we're going to have some music, and we're going to have some good food. We've got some pretty interesting presentations. Nice. We got a guy that plays the saxophone, and he's going to talk about the jazz of sales. How improvisation of both sales and jazz. We've got the chair of bioengineering at Clemson is Delphine Dean, and she's MIT PhD. She's also a ballet dancer, so she's going to talk about the dance of bioengineering. So we're going to do some fun stuff too.
That is interesting. That is going to be an interesting conference. I'm looking forward to it. I got a ticket, so I will be there. I'm looking forward to it. So where did this event come from? Where did the Future Fest come from?
Well, last year I applied for a National Science Foundation grant to fund the development of regional innovation ecosystem, and we actually made the first cut. We didn't ultimately get funded anything, and I started talking to some of the big organizations. I went to see Brent Westmoreland, who's an IT director at the BMW Information Technology Research Center, and we were talking about what the ecosystem he would like to see around him. And as I was walking out the door, he said, "You know what I really want to see is South by Southwest in Greenville." And that's just all he had to say to me. So within a couple of weeks, I've got the Interventure Futures Festival. And then the question is, what is that? And so, I started reaching out to people, and we had 3 different planning meetings, and starting to talk to what this might be. And so one thing that evolved from that is what I just said is, don't make it a conference, make it a festival. So, art and music and good food and, some business. And then the other big thing that came out of it is what we really need is a festival of festivals. So not just kind of one event, but if South by Southwest is music and technology and a lot of things. So we couldn't pull that off in this fall. So one of the things we're going to try to set up this year is a multi-day, multi-event festival in 2024. So imagine lots of organizations working together, maybe plant tours of, some of the manufacturing facilities, maybe a tour of CUI car, some entertainment. I mean, the Reedy Reels Festival, which is an independent film festival, they're interested in working with us. So maybe, there's some independent film during the week. Maybe there's something.
Sounds like you're on to something.
The Peace Center's working on, and so we start to not only get people in Greenville engaged, but it becomes something that people from outside Greenville come and spend the week, and that starts to look and feel a little bit like South by Southwest, doesn't it? So just to make sure that listeners know what that is, I mean, it's a big festival in Austin, Texas, and it's technology and arts and entertainment, live music, and we're not gonna be Austin. We're gonna be authentically us. But that same idea of mixing art and technology and entrepreneurship and innovation, all kinds of activities that should be both enlightening and fun.
All right, and so this is not your first go around at organizing these types of events. You previously organized Interventure.
Not my first rodeo. No, it's not.
No. So tell me about Interventure itself. Tell me about when that started and how long.
Well, in the 90s, I ran an angel fund. It was called Capital Insights, and I raised about $15 million from 150 wealthy individuals in Greenville. We invested in an eclectic mix of companies based on the skill set of the people that invested with us. And that worked great until 2000, and then the technology bubble busted, and some of my partners started saying, I got to get my money back before I can invest more. And the largest investor was the chief financial officer of Kemet, which was a New York Stock Exchange company. So I went to be VP of strategy and communication there for about 5 years, and wanted to kind of get back into the venture business. And so I just came up with the idea of Interventure, and so we held the first one in 2004, and it was a venture capital conference. Had a lot of good people there. The governor came, and he was our keynote speaker, and we had the largest VC firm in the Southeast from Atlanta that was there. The president of both the University of South Carolina and Clemson came. I mean, it was a big deal. But at the end of the day, I'm talking to one of the associates in this big venture fund, And we were sharing a beer, and I said, how'd we do? And she said, oh, energy and enthusiasm, you get an A+, but the quality of your companies, I'm not coming back. Well, that's on the wrong answer, wasn't it? I mean, that's an important part of the entrepreneur's journey. On contact with customers, plans change. And in this case, the venture fund was the customer, right? We were bringing them here, asking them to invest in something. So that kind of sets me back, and you start thinking, well, what she's interested in investing in is talent, top talent in the upstate of South Carolina. Where is that? Well, it's in the big companies. It's in Michelin and GE and Milliken, Clemson. So I had a friend who was an executive at Michelin, and I went to see him and said, I want Michelin involved in Innoventure 2005. And he said, okay, John, you need plan B, because that ain't going to happen. We're very proprietary. We're very secretive. We're not going to do that. And I said, why are you answering the question I didn't ask? I didn't ask if they would do it. I asked how to get them to do it. So we left lunch, and a couple weeks later, he calls me back, and he says, somebody I need to introduce you to. And it was a fellow named Ralph Holzman. He was director of external research at Michelin. And so he came to Innoventure 2005. We actually did it at what's now the Greenville Convention Center. So we had this exhibit hall, and Michelin had a big exhibit. I mean, it could have been the tire display at Tire Kingdom. I mean, that's about how much they disclosed, which was nothing, right? But you know what? They came. Lightning didn't strike. The Michelin American Research Corporation didn't melt down. Everything was okay. And so, I took Ralph and we went over to Milliken. It's like, okay, Michelin did it, would Milliken do it? And we iterated our way to the right person there. And so the next year it was Michelin and Milliken, and then soon it was GE was involved, and Blue Cross was involved, and Sealed Air. And so it kind of evolved into big companies. And we did that for about 10 years and kind of ran a normal life cycle. And anytime you focus on this kind of thing, you don't really working with a company. I wasn't working with Michelin, really. I'm working with Ralph Holzman, right? And I'm not really working with Milliken. I'm working with the VP of Research, Chris DeSoja. And when they rotated to their next job or, to the next company, it's like starting over. There's no institutional memory in these big companies. And we got about 10 years into it, and it was getting a little bit long and leggy. And we hit a year where 3 or 4 of our contacts at our major anchors all left at the same time, and my partner and I were a little bit burned out, and we decided to declare victory. And I had a couple of people say, well, why did you do that? I said, well, I wanted to do it while you're still asking that question. I didn't want you to come one year and it'd be obvious why we were doing it. And so I've gone and done a few other entrepreneurial things since then, and like I said, a couple of years ago, started getting more interested in kind of building the regional innovation ecosystem. And when the fellow at the BMW Information Technology Research Center said we need South by Southwest in Greenville, I said okay, and that started the journey we're on now. And we'll take the first step next week, and hopefully we get some traction and can grow from there.
Hopefully. Well, that's been quite a journey. So I know you've definitely been involved in economic development around this area for a very long time.
A long time.
40 years.
Yeah.
40 years. That's that is an impressive track record, John.
Some things have worked and some things have blown up on the pad. So that's kind of the nature of it, right?
That's how innovation works, right? You try something. If it works, you keep going. If it doesn't, you try another thing. I remember
one of the early SpaceX launches. I was following Elon Musk on Twitter, and the rocket got a few feet off the pad and exploded. And Musk on Twitter said, "Wow, wasn't that cool?" I mean, he just blew away however many $100 million, and his response was, "Wow, that was really cool." Now, how many CEOs in America would probably the first one would have been to the attorney?
Yeah, something. What was it? Something with I think it was with Starship. When that thing lifted off, the very first time it blew up, and he said it was an unscheduled rapid disassembly.
Right. Unscheduled rapid disassembly. That's right. Well, and he also, he also was pretty cool about that. He said, we collected all the information we wanted to collect. It'd have been nice if it had made it into orbit, but that wasn't really the objective this time. I'm not sure NASA knew that when they gave them a license, but that's just the nature of it. And I was talking to somebody earlier today, and I think the real way to go through all of this is it's about learning, isn't it? It's really about learning what works. And so if you try something and it doesn't work, that's not really a failure if you learn from it. If you improve. Mm-hmm. And now you want to kind of limit your learning sometimes. You don't want to blow up too many of these things. But if you really look at it that way and say, what did I learn from it? How do I do better next time? And in fact, do better next time. Then it can be good lessons.
Absolutely. So with as involved as you've been for as long as you have in trying to move things forward in the upstate, how did that become such a driver for you?
Oh, I don't know. It's why do you have a passion for anything you do? I mean, my family's been in South Carolina since the 1700s, so I'm kind of rooted here. I was born in Anderson, grew up in Charleston, and went to Clemson, went to graduate business school at Georgia, and came to Greenville right out of college. So it was my first job, and I've been here ever since. And I do have kind of a passion for the region. I'd love to see us, get to the next level. And I don't know. It's just, some people like tennis and some people like play bridge, and this is what I like to do. I have a friend that plays Wordle and wants me to do Wordle every morning so she can kind of compare our results. And I say, no, I work puzzles every morning. It's just not that one.
Exactly. Oh, man. Well, so, all right. So InnoVenture's coming up September 22nd, you said. All right. And so what time does it start?
Registration is going to open at 11:30, and then we're going to have a networking lunch. We'll kick it off about 12:30 or so. But we want people to come in time to get some lunch and meet everybody else. I mean, the networking here is a really important part of it. So, get there 11:30, 11:45, something like that, and then we'll have a couple of hours of some of the inspirational presentations. Then some of the big companies are going to present what their needs are, and then we'll take another long break. And the presenters will go to high top tables, and so the audience will be able to, know where to connect with the presenters if they, wanted to have a conversation. We've done this in the past, and that worked really well. So the presentations are 8 minutes and 10 slides, and they're just back to back to back to back. There's no questions, no break in between them. So there'll be about 8 of them in a row, and we'll take this long break. And then we'll come back, and we got a couple of other inspirational things. And then we got a really cool thing that the people that are there September the 22nd are actually going to help collaboratively put together the first draft of the agenda for the InnoVenture Futures Festival 2024. So we're going to do that.
Really?
We've got a little bit of secret sauce as how we're going to do it. We'll announce it that day. But we hope that everybody has a good time, kind of working together on this. And it'd be kind of cool to get to the end of the day, and we've got an agenda that was based on the input we got from the folks that were in the audience that day. So
yeah, it would be. I've never heard of doing.
Well, it was kind of fun. We were in a planning meeting, and we threw this idea out, and there was somebody in the room, a guy that's an AI guru. And he came up to us afterwards. He says, I think I can do that for you. And so he's put together this application that we're going to use, and it's kind of cool. I mean, we kind of said it flippantly, wouldn't it be kind of neat? And he came on and said, yeah, well, I think I can do that. So, it's a first draft. So maybe the agenda we come up with is good. Maybe it's kind of crazy, but either way, it should be fun. And that's really what we're trying to aim for there, something we can work together on during the day.
Yeah. I like it. You're trying to predict the future at a futures festival. So.
Well, that's the theme of the festival, right? I mean, the best way to predict your future is to create it.
Yep.
And you can sit back and you can let events control you, or you can step up and try to lead and take control of the future. You can't you can't really.
I like that.
There's just so many serendipitous things that happen to us in life, both positive and negative. But the people who ultimately are the most successful are very intentional about it, right? And and tenacious.
Yeah,
I mean,
true.
there are going to be setbacks, and so. But if you have a goal, I mean, Musk wants to put people on Mars. He's willing to tolerate a lot of explosions, rapid deassemblies, to get there.
Yep, rapid unscheduled
Right.
assemblies. Nice. So are there any tickets left?
Sure. We'd love to have, some more folks attend. We'll probably shut registration down the day before, but yeah, there's room for other people to attend.
Now, how much are the tickets this year?
The $75.
$75. Okay, and people can register for those on your website. Your website is
so Innoventure.com and
Innoventure.com. That's INNOVEN.
Correct. And you can see the agenda, and then you can register online.
All right, perfect. That's awesome. So you, I assume you're deeply paying attention to Clemson football this year.
Oh, we're not going to talk about football, are we?
We're in upstate South Carolina.
Football this year? Is that true?
Well, it's been predicted that they might play some football.
I'm still waiting.
I guess we'll see in the next couple of weeks.
I'm looking forward to it. That's
they had one of the wide receivers was number one on SportsCenter this past week. Camp Green, I think it was. That was pretty cool.
It's hard to bet against Dabo. He's one of the better coaches in America, and I think people forget sometimes that these guys are 18, 19, 20 years old. They're kids, right? And
you could say he's very intentional and tenacious.
He's intentional and tenacious about it. I'm old enough to remember Danny Ford and winning that first national championship in 1981, and I remember watching the Danny Ford show one Sunday morning, and he said, "You think your job is hard?" He says, "My job depends on the performance of 18-year-olds on Saturday." And again, we kind of forget that, don't you? I mean, they got uniforms and helmets; they look like professionals, but they're still kids, and they get excited, and they make mistakes, and they turn the ball over, and all kind of crazy. No matter how many times you tell them not to, and they're student athletes, so they got to go to class and they got to study, and the guys playing on Sunday, that's all they do, and that's not true of these guys in college. Yep. So, but Dabo will get them back.
Well, I deeply appreciate you having the event on a Friday and not on a football
well,
Saturday.
Nobody would come if we did it on football Saturday. Well, here's the truth.
Exactly. See,
so here's the truth. I mean, we wanted to do it on a day, of course, when the Hyatt was available, but we're going to finish up about 5:30, and then live music in Greenville downtown is in Noma Square, which is right outside the Hyatt. So what we want people to do is hang around for an hour or two, listen to the live music downtown, have a beverage of their choice while they do that, maybe socialize a little bit. So we didn't schedule it around football, but we did schedule it around live music downtown. So, yeah.
Nice. That's a really good idea. So is there anything else you'd like to talk about while we got you?
Yeah. So I went to the Next Venture Summit today, and it was interesting. Yeah. In one sense, it's a pretty good community. It's coming together. It's much more mature than it was. I mentioned I started an angel fund in 1993, I guess, and I told some of my friends at Venture South, which is the angel fund today, that if you think this is hard now, you should have been doing it in Greenville in 1993. It was a lot different then. I can
believe that.
There was a presenter this morning who was talking about Greenville and what a wonderful place Greenville is, and how smart, talented people are moving to Greenville and all. And he said, these things just kind of happen. You can't predict, when a community is going to do this. And I'm sitting here thinking, no. I remember being in visiting meetings 20, 25 years ago saying this is what we were going to be, right? And I'm not saying there was a playbook and a project management plan and everything got done perfectly. And there's things that happen we didn't expect and things we hoped for that hadn't quite been realized. But on the whole, the vector was right, and a lot of what's happened, was a long time coming, and a lot of creative imagination 20, 30, 40 years ago. And
Oh yeah, I mean, my first job out of college was working for Nuvox
Right.
Communication, which is Windstream now, and I worked at the building that they used to have at the intersection of Main
Right.
Street and Washington, which was right across the street from an old condemned building that sat
Right.
empty for years, and that's where the Greenville One building
Right.
stands now. But for years, I mean, you had this old
it was an old
decomposing building just sitting in the middle of
old
downtown.
Woolworth store. It closed and
Yeah,
was,
yeah, it was an old clothing
dilapidated.
store.
And the interesting thing about that building was it had been handed down through a couple of generations, and so it was owned by a whole lot of people, many of whom didn't live in Greenville anymore, and nobody quite knew who owned it all. And so the guy that ultimately
Oh, really?
purchased it, spent years tracking down all the individual owners and kind of putting the parts and pieces together, and
that's interesting.
that's why it took so long to fix that building. But I mean, that's a good example of, you can say, well, gosh, nobody saw that coming, but somebody spent years, patching all that together, and a lot of the things in Greenville. I mean, Knox White's been mayor 26 years, and so you got Falls Park and you got Unity Park, and a lot of the other green spaces and restaurants, Fluor Field, and he's provided a lot of leadership for that. And if you go down by the Hyatt across the street, there's a whole memorial to Max Heller, who was mayor in the 70s.
Yeah.
And when you read some of those monuments, what you find out is Knox was president of Greenville High School about that time, and he's working with Knox. Now, he left and went to Wake Forest College and then law school, and circled back. But he was a young person involved in some of that, while he was here, and so he kind of caught that vision, and has turned out to do a good job. Now, it wasn't perfect, right? I mean, there's not everything worked. I mean, there were some lawsuits, people got ticked off, and I mean, we remember all the good things, but it wasn't a straight line, that's for sure, and it still isn't. I mean, there's people that are critical about what's happened now. I mean, I walk about 5 or 6 miles a day, and I take photos with my phone, and I post a photo every day to Facebook, mostly just to do something positive every morning, rather than moan and groan about what's going on.
Yeah.
But it strikes me, I can take a picture of downtown that I just think is a pretty picture. And folks will say, that's just not my Greenville. Older folks, that's just not my Greenville. It's not the Greenville I grew up in. I don't know that place anymore. And it just strikes me that there's just so much nostalgia, because when I got here, the Greenville they're talking about was dead. And
Yeah. It went belly up with the textile
so
industry.
they're talking about something that was 10, 20 years before that. And Grandmama went downtown with them, and bought them ice cream, and they went to the Army Navy store, and that's what they remember as a kid. But what it's turned into today, that's not. I had Main Street today has these beautiful tree lined, this green canopy. I've had people look at old pictures of Greenville when Main Street was a four-lane highway, and said that's really what it should be. I mean, they regret that it was narrowed and it turned very pedestrian. I'm saying, really? I mean, you look at those two pictures and you want the one that looked so much industrial, and you don't like the one we have today. But
I can't even imagine what would be the point of that.
it's just not the Greenville they grew up in, right? And my only point is, anytime you're making progress, anytime you're doing something different, it's not a straight line, and not everybody's on board. You got to overcome the naysayers, the doubters, and the cynics. That's the hardest part, and maybe the lesson of my career is I've done a lot of stuff, and I've had a lot of people tell me I'm crazy, and maybe I am, but just being persistent and tenacious, and moving forward in spite of the naysayers, the cynics, and the doubters. It wears you down sometimes, and so I told you about Intervention wrapping up, and it's taking a little bit of a break, more than a little bit, a few years. You kind of circle back to it now, but you can kind of circle back with a renewed sense of energy, because you've just been able to kind of decompress from that for a while. And it's
yeah. Well, I mean, you're doing it at a good time too, because there was that COVID break in the middle where everything shut down, and so now it's a perfect opportunity for everything to come back.
I mean, Clemson's got a new Elevate strategic plan. ICAR just got a $100 million grant from the Army. They're
wow.
To develop off-road autonomous vehicles. The CU ICAR Students Deep Orange project is an off-road autonomous vehicle. There's a major corporation in town, they haven't quite announced it yet, that's interested in building a big innovation campus in Greenville. We're probably,
Was that Crescent? Is that Crescent?
They haven't announced what they're doing yet.
Oh, well, they announced it because they're hosting the next Carolina Code Conference in August. They were the big sponsors for us, so we got to talk about it a lot.
Mark Ferris, who's president of the Greenville Area Development Corporation, is retired, and so I think the board of the GADC is now kind of thinking about how to reimagine economic development in Greenville County. I mean, one reality is there are no more large manufacturing sites in the county, so we got to do something different. So, more innovative and creative. And so one of the things we want to do with the Futures Festival is not only have something here, but if you can imagine all the global relationships organizations here. I mean, the people that BMW know around the world, or ZF, or Bosch, or, Clemson. I mean, the ICAR professors and people, and Upstate Alliance, and the Greenville Area Development Corporation, and the Anderson Economic Development. If everybody, if we had this festival of festivals here, and everybody began to reach out to their global relationships, and maybe some of it is people physically coming here, maybe some of it is, online and video, and, we really start to engage a global community and pick something where we're distinctive.
Yeah.
And I think that has to do with advanced manufacturing. I mean, we've got best in class manufacturing and supply chains here. Mobility, with ICAR and Michelin and BMW. I mean, the actual product itself, not just the manufacturing technology, but the product itself. And I think we can position ourselves as best in class in the world. And it's one of those things people around the world will look at us and say, well, that makes sense. The biggest BMW plant in the world there, Michelin North America's here. You've got these tier one suppliers all around that. You got University International Center of Automotive Research, and supporting technologies like AI and machine learning at Clemson, material science. And so, I to your point, I think a lot of things are coalescing and coming together, that if we can really get people to cooperate, and this is what I hope comes out of the inaugural Intervention Futures Festival, is we get people in the room that maybe are meeting each other for the first time, and we can walk out of that with a consensus that, a year from now, let's have a Festival of Festivals, multi-day event where lots of different organizations are participating in plant tours or technology demonstrations or music festivals or independent film festivals, and people are coming here and say, hey, this is really cool. And I just think it's an exceptional opportunity if we can really get people to participate. So
that has been one of the more interesting things that I've kind of gotten to observe, because as Greenville has I don't want to say modernized, but maybe beautified, it's been attracting a lot more people. That downtown is such a fixture that everybody talks about. It's almost like walking through a work of art. I've worked in downtown full time for 8 years of my career, and what I always found interesting was that it didn't matter what the weather was like outside, it was always nice on Main Street. Every time of year, you couldn't even explain it. It was just a nice place.
Well, one of the things I really love about living here is there's 4 seasons. It's a little bit hot in the summer, and then you have the fall, which is beautiful with the trees. It gets a little bit cold in the winter, and then you have the spring, and beautiful with everything blooming and turning green. And in a lot of places where it's just really hot or it's just really cold, and we have 4 seasons here that are delightful for the most part, and I really like it. And,
we really do.
I do think things are coming together. you know, and when that happens, so that's happened.
And a
That's
lot of
happened a
people are
couple of
moving here.
times in my career where the stars just aligned, and you really can't make that happen, but you just kind of have to ride that wave when it comes. You know, you got to recognize it and see it, and you know, and take it for a ride. And we're at one of those moments. You talked
Absolutely.
about, you know, people coming to Greenville, so I can remember some of these visiting, you know, events I was involved in, where you know we were trying to attract talented, educated people. Well, today in the city of Greenville and in the Five Forks area of Greenville County, educational attainment and per capita income is comparable with Raleigh, North Carolina, and Austin, Texas, and that's happened just in the last little bit. It's like,
Believe that.
wow. But be careful what you ask for, right? And
Yeah.
you know, that creates some issues. I mean, they bring disposable income and they drive up real estate prices, and you know that creates some problems for some people that have lived here a long time. And so this, you know, there's kind of two sides to that. But when people start complaining about, you know, real estate prices going up and whatnot, it's like we need to take care of that. In particular, we need to make sure that, you know, the people that do the service jobs have the ability to live close to the city, right? I mean, you know, the people that, you know, do the cleaning, the people that work in the restaurants, the first responders, the teachers. I mean, all those folks have to be able to live here too. So we got to make sure that we have a community, but we also need to recognize that what's causing the problem is a whole lot of smart, educated, affluent people are moving here. And that's a good thing. You know, that's we work really hard to make that happen. And
Yep, that was one of the most interesting things for our conference, for the Carolina Code Conference. We had so many programmers and who have moved to this area, taking advantage of the remote work option. You hear about these companies all over the country that are these huge national brands, and these unicorn type companies, and a bunch of senior people that work for these companies live right here in Greenville, because Greenville's where they wanted to live. So when they got the option to work remote, they said, "I'm moving to Greenville, and I'll zoom in and you know, hop in on Slack and commit my code remotely and all that. We can, you know, we're good at this."
well, there's a lot of people that, you know, now
Even
have
the companies,
children and they now have families, and maybe they were in big cities and not a place where they want to raise their families, and so they're looking for someplace else. And for whatever reason, they came to Greenville for something, and they said, "Wow, this is cool." To your point, I mean, maybe it was just one trip or so, and they decided, "Hey, I'm gonna do that." And you hear that story a lot, of people that are just here, and that becomes a self-fulfilling reality, right? Kind of the more people that do that, the more compelling it becomes for the next people, and it don't work for everybody. Again, I mean, if you've been here a long time and you're not really into the change, you know, it can be uncomfortable, and I understand that, and you know, but I mean, I think on the whole, it's positive. I mean, you're either growing and getting better, or you're declining. I mean, I don't think you can just stand still. And I've been here when it was in decline. You know, it was kind of a dead textile town when I first moved here, and that isn't what we want to be. And so I think what's happening is just pretty phenomenal. There's 72,000 people that live in the city today. There's 550,000 live in the county, but the city itself is pretty small. But 10 years ago, there was only like 57,000 people. So there's like 15,000 people more that have moved here in the last decade. Well, a population of 57,000 people, that's a lot, right? That's a big percentage increase. And, you know, then you think, okay, well, you know, over the next 10 years, you're going to get another 20 or 25,000 people. So where are all they going to go? So that's why you see all the cranes and the construction, all the apartments going up, you know, because a lot of people moving here and need a place to live. And I think not only that, I mean, there's people that are moving out to the suburbs, but I think there's also a kind of a new urban culture developing. I live downtown, and I'm very pedestrian. I walk almost everywhere I go. I'm fortunate that, you know, most of what I need, I live a couple blocks from a grocery store, and you know, when I went to the next Venture Summit today, I walked over there, and you know, you can walk to the Peace Center and things like that. And that's a different. You know, I spent 35 years out in the suburbs, and you couldn't walk anywhere. You went anywhere, you had to get in your car. And I think the more people get accustomed to that, the more are going to like it. I've made that comment to people that you know, the level of educational attainment and per capita income now matches Austin and Raleigh. And I've had people say, yeah, a lot of retired people have now moved to Greenville. And I've said, you know, I walk 5 or 6 miles a day. You go to Gather Greenville, you go to the Commons, you see a lot of young people in baby strollers. Now, there may be dogs in those baby strollers, but it's it's a lot of young professionals, and it's really encouraging, you know, when you see that. And it's also pretty diverse. You know, I mean, you go to Unity Park, and it's, you know, pretty diverse population of people there, and that's very encouraging as well. We were talking about kind of that urban lifestyle that I think you were talking about working remotely, and that's one aspect of it. But I think even more than that is just, you know, living in a more dense area and being able to walk or ride a bike, you know, where you want to go, and get into a car less. And
yeah, I was actually talking to a programmer the other day who was you know, talking to me about his e-bike, and how committed he is to living that e-bike lifestyle. Right. And I know a lot of people that do that.
More and more people, you know, and I think the Swamp Rabbit Trail is a big part of that. You know, as more of the trails get built, you know, now you can go all the way from Icar all the way north of Travelers Rest.
Yeah. And having Hencappy around here kind of helped a lot with that too. Kind of put a face to a lot of it.
Absolutely. And, you know, in Boyd Cycling being here and being such a player in bicycle wheels and rims, and, you know, there was a new bicycle company that's, I think, located in Landrum, and I saw the folks with Boyd here in the last day or so, and they told me they were involved in recruiting them here. So you're right, it's becoming kind of a bicycle mecca, not only for training, but now in terms of the parts and pieces of the bicycles themselves. And so,
yeah, I live out here in Easley, and they did the Doodle Trail out here. It was kind of the same idea. Took up an old railroad track and did a bike trail that goes all the way from downtown Easley to Pickens. And I think the goal is eventually to connect it to the Swamp Rabbit Trail.
Okay, it'd be quite a hike from Easley to the Swamp Rabbit Trail. But yeah, I mean, you know, now it goes all the way from downtown Easley. It used to stop, but now they run it through the cemetery, but goes to Pickens. Yeah, so it's about 5 miles. How far is it from Easley to Pickens?
Easley to about 5 miles sounds right.
Yeah, because I've actually walked from Easley to Pickens and back.
We have technology. I'm going to look it up right now.
Yeah. I mean, I've walked from Greenville to Travelers Rest and back. Now, you know, that's 20 miles round trip. You know you've been walking that day.
Wait, you've walked that? Why? Now I'm curious.
Why?
7.7
I mean,
miles.
you know, some people just insist on the pain, I guess. No, I really enjoy walking. And when I walk by myself, I listen to books. So, so I walk about an hour and a half a day, and I listen to an audiobook while I do it. So it's kind of a double duty. It helps me stay fit. But I mean, just
any recommendations?
Excuse me.
Any audiobook recommendations? I've kind of started doing that myself.
Well, I've just started Walter Isaacs's book on Elon Musk, so I'm just a day into it. Any of his books are great. You know, Steve Jobs and Ben Franklin and innovators and all that. I love him. I've been into Churchill lately. I listened to a biography of Churchill. Now I'm on to the history of the English-speaking people. And something that people don't really realize about Churchill was he made a lot of money as a writer. He published a lot of books. He actually won a Nobel Prize in literature. Really? Yeah. And
I did not realize that.
He says he's not a professional historian, but he's a pretty good historian. And like Isaacson, a good storyteller, you know? And so maybe isn't as comprehensive as a academic historian would be, but he tells a good story, and he actually admits that, right? He in the beginning of the history of English-speaking people, he says, you know, what's in here are the things that were important to me, you know, in telling the story. There's a great biography of the Wright brothers that I really liked, and I love getting anecdotes out of these things. So one of the things I took away from that is these guys. Their father was educated and had a pretty good library in the house they grew up in. So they were kind of homeschooled. That's what we would call it today. But they didn't go to college. Yeah. And so they became, they opened their bicycle shop, and they were pretty good mechanics. They wrote to what was the modern equivalent of the National Weather Service, the turn of the 1900s, and they ordered weather maps, wind maps. And so they methodically picked Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, because it was a combination of the winds and the sand that they could crash into and not get hurt. And then they go down there, and there's this authority in the world, this French authority who's in aviation, and he's got the books of statistics and how aviation works. Of course, he's never flown, right? And so the Wright brothers are out doing their tests in Kitty Hawk with their Wright Flyer, and their data's not matching his. And because he was the authority, they just thought they were doing something wrong for the longest time. And of course, today we know their data was right and his was wrong. And I just love stuff like that, right? I mean, that's just that. As successful as they were early on, what held them back was their own head trash. They got the data right in front of them, but they just can't quite believe, that they've discovered something that nobody else in the world knew.
There's a lesson in there somewhere.
Well, there's a lesson for all of us in that, right? I mean, have the courage of your convictions, but that's so hard to do. I mean, it's just, to go contrary to the herd. Well, it's what makes Warren Buffett, right? I mean, what he does is not complicated. I mean, when everybody's panicking and selling, he buys, and when everybody's over-exuberant, he sells. That's a very easy thing today to say, but when there's blood in the water, man, it is hard to bet everybody else is wrong.
Well, the key to the Warren Buffett thing, too, is he buys when everybody else is selling, but he buys where he's got a tremendous amount of confidence in how the company's run, how the company's operated. So that was one of the things. I got really deeply into investing over the last couple of years, and I ended up reading all sorts of this stuff. And one of my favorite bits from it is, kind of the stuff they don't tell you. The whole buy low, sell high, but sometimes you're just buying low into something that's just going to keep going lower. It's a matter of knowing where to put the money, and he's putting it into very strong, reliable companies where he's looking at it and going, there's no reason for this company to be priced.
Well, at one time, the best investment he had was Coca-Cola, and he used to say he understood sugar water. Yeah. Right. Now I think the most money, and he was notoriously not a technology investor, and now ironically, his best performing investment has been Apple. And
pretty sure that's almost everybody's
big into a moat, right? They want to invest in something where there's a moat around it. And in both Coca-Cola and Apple, that moat's the brand. I mean, Apple's a cult. And so, if you're an Apple person, you're just going to buy the next generation Apple products, and you want them all work together. And that's really.
I did that for a solid 10 years. I understand. I was that guy. There was actually, I forget what the publication was, but there was a. Remember when the Mac versus PC commercials were out? Those were always really entertaining. The I'm a Mac, I'm a PC thing.
I had an original PC.
Nice. Well, they did. There was a publication in downtown Greenville that needed somebody to be on the cover of the Mac PC thing. They were going to have a Mac guy and a PC guy doing a local version of that. I was the Mac guy because I wouldn't shut up about Mac so much back then.
I had an original PC.
On Linux computers
it came
for the last
with DOS and BASIC.
7 years.
It didn't even have a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
It was VisiCalc came out after that. That's how long I've been doing this. And when I was in college, we had Trash 80s. I don't know if you remember that, but
Trash 80s?
The first personal computer, TRS-80. So the first personal computer I ever
TRS-80. Okay.
Nice. The output was printed.
Yeah, I remember my uncle telling me about doing punch cards back in the
Oh,
day.
no, I've done. My dad was a CE, a customer engineer for IBM. So when I was little, we used to go to the Charleston Navy Yard, and he'd let me punch cards. Now, I wouldn't program anything, but I definitely. And when I was in college, the first computer science class I took, we punched cards to do the first program, and we ran it through the card reader, and the professor said, "Now you've done it, you'll never see it again." And so I was kind of it. But nice. I'm really a little bit early in the PC revolution, because it was not really, like I said, the IBM PC. I guess I was in graduate school when it was released, but I didn't. I got one when I started at KPMG. That's what I came to Greenville for. And the New York office had forced the Greenville office to buy one, and it was in the corner. They hadn't even opened it, and I opened the thing, and there was the Tax Reform Act of '81 had passed, and there was an election you could make to get tax credits for something, and I wrote a little basic program to decide, for a client whether they should take this election or not. And I just remember the people in the office kind of hovering around me, and it was like, the Pacific Islanders that had seen, airplanes flying over in World War II, and it was like the cargo cult, and they were all just standing there just amazed that this thing would actually do anything. And then, it wasn't too long after that, the VisiCalc came out. And that was really the game changer. That was the first spreadsheet. But it was you almost had to program it. I mean, it was like slash commands. If you wanted to save something, slash save or slash copy. There was no pull down menus. That was Lotus 1, 2, 3, and that didn't happen for a few years. And the first PC didn't have a hard drive in it either. It was floppy disks.
That's right. That's right. I remember. See, I was a kid when those were coming out, and I remember having to playing games where you had to put in the next disc to if you moved from one screen to the other. There was they had all these little puzzle games called, I think, King's Quest and stuff, and you had to just walk around and solve puzzles. And if you went too far to the right, you'd have to put in disc 4, and you walk back to the left, switch it back out.
When I was a kid going out, with my dad on this big IBM mainframe, the floppy disks were 9 inches, I think. And they really were floppy, right? And then, of course, with the PC, they're 5 1/4 inch, and they're kind of floppy, And then by the time my son comes along, and it was mid-90s before he was old enough to play with it. This, 3.5 inch hard, diskettes. And I remember him looking at me one day and saying, "Why do they call them floppies?" I mean, he never seen one before. What he knew is they were all little hard plastic covers.
And kids today, they wonder, why is that the save?
Why is that the save button? That's exactly right. I was about to say that. There's an icon up there, and they have no idea what that icon is. They've never seen it.
No, if you have one of those discs sitting on your desk for some reason, they're like, why do you have a picture of the save button on your desk?
Well, and the problem with some of that stuff now is you don't have any hardware that can read it anymore. I mean, you can have all that.
Unless you've kept it around, which geeks like me do. I've got a whole closet full of old stuff that my wife wants me to get rid of. But
well,
you never know when you're going to need to take a wire out of it. So.
I've been to conferences where, they would hand out stuff on a CD. I don't have a CD drive anymore. So I mean, I literally can't play it anywhere. And that's just, every time that happens, that has to be an older person. Because there's
I mean, speaking of Apple, I remember Steve Jobs did that, right? I mean, Steve Jobs did that, right? He was the one that, when they first released an updated version of the MacBook that didn't have a CD drive in it anymore. And it was huge waves, and nobody had ever done that before, and people were completely freaking out about it. How are you going to upgrade it? How are you going to install it?
He had a pretty good sense that he knew more than everybody else. So it wasn't the first time he obsoleted something in an Apple product. Yeah.
All right. I just got another ridiculously loud thunderclap over here, so we should probably wrap this up.
Listen, I really appreciate it. Thank you for taking the time, and I've enjoyed the conversation, and I appreciate what you're doing. The Code School is, important, and
no, I'm not with Code School.
Oh, I'm sorry. What's it called?
Nope. Carolina Code Conference.
Code Conference. Okay,
I'm just running a conference.
So, no, that's fine. There you go. I made a mistake.
I'll edit that out.
Yeah. I know what you're doing. I just called it the wrong thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I understand. I started the Carolina Code Cast specifically because I was, I had all these applications for people to speak at the conference, and we only had so much time, and I wanted to include a lot of them, and there just wasn't room.
Yeah.
And because we did a 1-day format, and we're going to do a 2-day format. We still got 16 of them in, but there were 83 total submissions. And I was like, I really want to hear more from these people. So I decided, let's start a podcast, and I'm going to start interviewing some of them very, very soon.
Well,
but we'll do that after we get the word out about InnoVenture.
Yeah. Well, it's good. Thank you for doing that. That's important. All right.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thanks a lot, John. Oh, and I almost forgot. I have to give one quick shout out. Thanks to Herd Media for helping teach me how to do this podcast thing. Herd Media right here in Greenville. They helped me set up the Carolina Codecast in the first place, and they're coaching me through exactly what I need to be doing to get this thing right.
It's good to be part of an
shout out to Herd Media. Thank you very much. Yep. All right. Well, thanks a lot, John.
Bye.
Have fun in the swamp. Thanks for sticking with us for this very special edition of the Carolina Codecast. Thanks again to Herd Media for all of your advice and help in getting this podcast off the ground. If you're ever looking to start a podcast or need some advice in how to use the various tools that are involved, go check out Trust Herd. This has been the Carolina Codecast, Extended Edition.